Thank you all for coming. We are talking private collection ascensions, so hopefully we will all rise up to a new level by the time we're done here today. We live in a time where we have this phenomenon of the private museum. Private collections that are open to the public. In some cases, they serve where there are fewer resources for museums and not large collections. They serve a definite purpose, a helpful one. There is the question right now of such private museums draining resources from local museums. So the question is, can private collections supplement the work of museums, or are they competing with them? We have both things happening. Today we have two collectors here, one with a foundation, very established and very important, not pretending to be a museum, but serving another purpose entirely, and another private collector whose art is serving both a social and aesthetic purpose in Colombia. Both of these collections are kind of specific to the place they're in some way or other, and we'll talk about that. They're both, one is in a major city, the other in what we call a regional area, not a major city, but a town with a long history in art. So I'm going to start with Maja Hoffman, who's founded the LUMA Foundation and put it in Arles, France. So Maja, who has a family, of a heritage of collecting, started right here in Basel by her grandmother, is carrying the family business in a way to a different level. So Maja, I think we can start if you can talk about why you established this foundation to begin with. That was in 2004, I think you told me. So let's start there.
Thank you, Linda. I am a collector, yes. I learned how to collect, if I can say so, within the family collection, the family foundation, the Emmanuel Hoffman Foundation, where my grandmother called me to be when I was 20 years old. And this I continue to do for all these years. The collection is housed at Schaulager, while it's not exposed at the Kunstmuseum, and this is exposed because it's donated. It's long-term loan, I think you say in English. It's deposited at the Kunstmuseum in Basel. So actually, this is a very public engagement. So in 2004, I created my foundation more to produce artworks than to collect, because it was interesting to try and commission artists, and it was interesting to work directly with the art I really liked, with actually choosing a lot by myself in the beginning. So there were artists which I knew from different projects. So of course I could show you some images, but I don't know if it's the right moment. Maybe we do that later.
Well, let me ask you why it was important to you to establish a foundation. You could work with artists without the structure of a foundation.
The foundation is a good tool to do that. Yeah, it's also a possibility to then collect the works at the same time. And I always was a collector who was lending the pieces of work to a lot of different institutions around the world. And it worked very well like this. And in 2010, I don't know if you want me to jump to there.
Well, so you established the foundation in 2004. So where was the action? In Arles or in Zurich?
Oh, in Zurich. And with the foundation, I was able to co-commission work, like, for instance, in New York at the Bard College, an Olafur Eliasson installation at Bard College. It's upstate New York. And at the same time, I was also able to support the Festival of Photography in Arles, which is actually the first step to what I'm doing now in Arles. But I also went to see the director of the Kunsthalle Zurich at the time, Beatrix Roof, and I proposed that we could work together, and I supported part of the program ever since, I must say. So I felt like a young person at the time, and I felt like a young foundation, and I'm really happy because when you found something, when you are the founder, it's really very different than to carry the heritage. So I guess that really started to excite me a lot to be able to do so much. And I met a whole generation of artists that were not yet really represented. Some of them were in the Emmanuel Hoffman Foundation, but some were not. And we started to have a good time from there on.
So your foundation has, from the beginning then, always worked in partnership with other institutions.
Yes. We have a whole part of the program which is a program in partnership with other institutions, then another part which is directly with the artist, and then another part which is producing, movies, books, one-off project. So they are the long commitments, and then they are the shorter or one-off.
And what is the structure of the foundation? And is it specific to Switzerland or France that might be different than in America or in Latin America?
This foundation is a Swiss, and it's a non-for-profit in Switzerland. Ever since we had, we also created a second foundation, which is not in Zurich but in Bern. And this foundation has been helpful, like a tool to construct the projects in France, because that was really organized that way, and also, for instance, to organize the Gstaad Biennial, which second iteration we had just now in the winter. And then we also have now a LUMA USA account, which helps us to find partnerships in the States and to fund a really small part of the program in the States. So we don't say that too much because we are very busy right now.
So there are many spokes to this wheel. You're facilitating the production of art, working directly with living artists. You have the photo festival in Arles. You work with Bard College in New York State, where there's a university museum, and I forget what. And you have and you, as a collector, you're also collecting archives for research purposes.
Well, the archive I collect more, not personally for my personal collection, but really with the LUMA Foundation. Yeah? This is part of the collection. We believe, and this is something I don't do alone. I have a core group of consultants and advisors, and we designed this program that we're calling the Living Archive Program. It means that we actually archive a lot of what we do, plus we try to also collect archives which are already existing, preferably, as I said, from living artists. Yeah, I'm also supporting other institutions. Like I like to be involved in the places where I live. So I'm like supporting the Serpentine Gallery. I also supported the Tate Gallery, or I supported the new Museum of Contemporary Art in New York over the years, and not in the right order. I mean, but there are some. And if I forget somebody, it's just because we don't have the time.
How do you have time for your family?
Oh, they love what I do, so they show up.
So it's the family's involved. Leon, this is Leon Amitai from Bogotá. You have yet to establish a foundation. Do you think about doing that? Is it important to do that in Colombia? how do your collection has really become part of your business, which is textile manufacture?
Linda, thank you for having us. Maja, it's a real honor to share the stage with you. Well, I think the experience of sharing the collection with our people has become very special for me, and it's the real meaning of continuing collecting. Where is that going to head? If it's a private foundation for me, I don't know yet. I would like to explain you a little bit more how it started.
Please.
And it really started by coincidence. It was, I think, the same way that you don't wake up in the morning and you say, I'm going to be a collector. It starts happening. The same way it started happening for us with our collection being public or more public. And it's just by coincidence that we happened to move to a bigger office space, bigger warehouse, which allowed me to engage in more demanding pieces, installations, and other things that otherwise I wouldn't have acquired, because just the idea of keeping all of those works in storage is just is not the proper idea or my idea of enjoying the art. So basically, by having all of these pieces little by little occupying the office space, I understood, because at the beginning I did it honestly for me to enjoy them. I was not thinking that many of my workers, people that work in the warehouse, or secretaries or designers working with us, would be interested to know about what I was doing. But soon enough, a couple of them started approaching me and started to asking me what was the meaning of some specific works, installations, and very conceptual pieces. So I decided to start giving some education about what it is contemporary art, what is conceptual art, why sometimes the concept is more important than the aesthetic of the pieces. And that became really magical for us. We have today 250 people. We bring voluntarily the people that wants to come with us to museum exhibitions, to local fairs. We bring curators and artists to talk to them. Last exhibition we took them to was an Olga de Amaral exhibition of a Colombian artist at the Mambo, the Museum of Modern Art in Bogotá. We had more than 100 people coming with us. Some of them, they come with their kids, with their parents, with their friends. And it's been an amazing experience. So I think that keeps me thinking about what's going to be next for the collection, for the people working with me, and also for the city, for the country. How at the end of the story, Linda, I think the most important for me is how can I impact the most amount of people through art. How can I impact my employees? How can I impact the art ecosystem, all the people that are involved in the art in Colombia? How can I impact people that comes from outside and visit us and look what we do? Maja, we had the opportunity to have you there. It was great to have you. And these kind of visits, like when you came to Colombia and local people and people from the factory, when we share the collection, we have these amazing conversations and amazing discussions sometimes, and sometimes become very passionate because sometimes it involves politics, and we all have different politic views. But I think that's what is really amazing for me, all that journey that at the end of the story becomes really a biography of your life.
So, but the collection is in your factory and in your home, I imagine. And so there's no public access, really, but you're taking them out to the public rather than the other way around. Yes? It's a little reverse of the way it generally goes. Why is it important for you to have an impact on a wider public that actually doesn't have access?
I think I took that responsibility as a personal thing. I am a really believer that art can change a society. Colombia is a country in which, by any particular reason, I don't know why, I keep on asking this to a lot of friends and people that I meet. Why in Colombia we haven't had more, there are some of the images of the office space. Basically, all of the offices are surrounded by art pieces and installations. Those are the visits that we do to some of the museums with some of the workers or co-workers, some of the people from many different backgrounds. And while we look at them, I'm gonna continue. So basically, I try to do a couple of things. With the people working with me, I try to give them the access for them to stop thinking that art don't belong to them, which sometimes happens. If somebody does not belong to a socio-economical level, they believe art is not for them. That happens in Colombia a lot.
It happens everywhere a lot.
I have like these kind of comments from a gentleman that was driving one of our trucks that one day came to me and thanked me because after bringing him to museums, he realized that he could bring his family. He was not probably ignorant enough anymore so that he could bring his family to a museum that is for free. It's an activity that it does not cost them anything, but they just feel they don't belong. So those kind of stories are very, very important for me, and that you know, that gives me more enthusiasm to continue doing this kind of thing. So one thing is the people working with me. How can I engage them more into arts for whatever reason they may want? And then on the other hand, we have our customers, which are mainly, let's say, fashion designers, and they're in the fashion world. And very surprisingly, by launching our collections in museums, because we do that very often, we launch our fabric collections, we make like fashion shows inside the museums, and then
really?
Yeah, that's very interesting. And then we following that event, we have a curator from the museum that gives all the customers and my workers in that environment a guided visit to the exhibition. So by doing that, I realized, asking to my customers about how many times they visit the museum, that between 85 and 90% of them, they have never visited the Museum of Contemporary Art of the city. And that caught my attention because, and I also asked them, when they go to look for fashion information to New York, to Paris, or to London, or to LA, if they go and visit some art institutions, and they said they don't have time. So, again, I got this as my duty to share with them as much information as I can about art, so that they really get inspired by art the same way, or at least in any way as I do. Because for me, art has changed the way I see the business, fashion, the relation. So I want as many people as possible, name it the people working with me or my customers, people that surround me, to have the more exposure to art as possible.
I imagine everyone in Bogotá would want to go to work for you.
You already have many people working for you, no?
Yes. We have 250 people.
Yeah,
working.
so that's a good way to spread the word.
Yes, but that was going to be my next question, in fact, is how you spread the word, because does it get outside attention?
Yes.
What your activities? I mean,
Yes, we have, since Maria Paz Gaviria became the director of Arbo, art fair in Bogotá, and that has helped a lot, the whole environment of the arts in Colombia, bringing amazing people, curators, and great galleries. And when she started taking over Arbo, she started asking me to start receiving people during the fair. So we do that, and we are kind of open to anybody by recommendation. If anybody friends of me that they have friends that they know their kids like art. They can call me, and we are always open for them to visit. It's not necessarily something that you can buy a ticket and you can come. Not like that. At least not for now, and I honestly don't know how I am going to do in the future, because I don't know if in a country like Colombia, when the institutions are so immature yet for art, I don't know if the best interest of the country would be for me to make my own institution and for another person to do its own institution, or maybe we can get together and make an institution among 5 or 8 or 10 of us, and that will be much more meaningful for a country like Colombia. So we keep on thinking about that. Political situation in Colombia is not that stable right now, so it keeps us, all of us that we love art, thinking about this whole idea. This afternoon we were talking about exactly that with one of the galleries, and we keep that in our minds. But hopefully we'll find a way, because that will create an amazing impact in our society.
Yes, but where is there a stable government in the world today? Not too many places. Not where I come from.
In Switzerland, right?
In Switzerland.
Yeah.
I can come and work for you, Maja.
Maybe you can do some joint ventures.
Great.
Maya likes partnering with other institutions, so
LUMA,
maybe we can make
LUMA
a marriage
Colombia.
Here. So Leon's activities are really quite localized. Maya, it sounds like you've always been international. You work with international artists and with in institutions and biennials in different countries.
Yeah, but I think Leon is in a fast-growing country and in a fast-growing continent. I am coming from Europe, where lots of things are really happening out of habit. And of course, it's a completely different positioning and a complete different role.
Yes.
So it is true that I work with other institutions, but there was coming a moment where I wanted to produce, and to produce I was needing a space, because it would not be interesting to go and produce in India. This is completely the contrary of the way I think. I took India like an example, of course, and not, I think it's interesting to be international but implanted locally. I think it's very important. So once you work on an institution, you need to have this relationship with the place you are in.
So can you describe now, actually maybe we can see a little bit of what LUMA looks like in Arles, because it's quite magnificent and it didn't happen overnight. And
yeah, I thought maybe you would be interested. So in 2010, we were able to start a project in Arles, which encompasses old buildings that you see in the factory, and which encompasses also, let me see, a new building which is done by Frank Gehry. I just showed you the compound. It's 10 hectares. I don't know in acres. I always get it wrong. And it is, this building you see now is 3,500 meters. It's been refurbished by Annabelle Seldorf. In the front, there is another gallery for photography. This is Frank Gehry's building we are working at. We are actually halfway, and we will be opening, I think, at the start or the middle of 2019. Here you see why I'm tired looking, because this is my everyday thing for now. We started, because Linda asked me, what do we do for the public interface? We started for the first year, 2 weeks ago, to open a conference, an international conference that we want to become a yearly meeting. It's called LUMA Days, and we created what we call Atelier LUMA. This is a design-operated atelier which is producing with things from the region. It's set up like an exhibition. People can come. This is Lisa Phillips from the New Museum. We invited the Idea City conference which is a conference that travels over 2 years in different cities, and Arles was one of the stops. This is our program of this year, so we are just learning how to communicate, right? We don't really know how to do that, but as we open more and more, not to the public, but to partnerships, we now are looking for our identity. I don't even have a logo. I would like to advocate for without logo, no logo for all our future communication. I thought you might be interested in this. I don't know. No logo means maybe our partners will not come with very big logos, but we don't put ours either. So our program of this year, we are producing an Annie Leibovitz show, which is produced out of the archive of Annie Leibovitz, all her first years. We also house a residency, which is the LADP, the Benjamin Millepied dancing residency this year. And we show out of my collection, which is actually part of the LUMA Foundation collection, the Peter Fischli, David Weiss Visible World piece. This will be the program for this summer. It's opening in 2 weeks.
And this is open to the public.
It is all open to the public. Why did I want to show this? It's because All the White will be housing exhibitions. We share it with the Rencontre Photo. That means I'm hosting the Rencontre Photo graciously in these spaces that I'm owning now. So the 2 buildings on the left side will house the Rencontre Internationale de la Photographie. The building in the middle is housing the Annie Leibovitz show. We also have now a cafe, the boutique for the Rencontre. We try to mix and we try to create a win-win situation. And on the last, number 8, I think it says, is still owned by the publishing house and given to the Rencontre for the summertime. I think they want to give it.
Which publishing house?
Actes Sud, who is a publisher which is installed in Arles since years. This leads me to your question. You know, some people prefer to go in smaller centers. They don't want to be in big capital cities. It gives you the possibility to think. For instance, Arles was always a seasonal place up to now. Think tanks, thinking in the winter, producing in the winter, showing in the summer when the city is full is very good. But this year we decided to open a little earlier to also test whether the season can be prolonged, because the inhabitants of Arles really would like to not be so sleepy in the winter, and they feel there are too many people in the summer, and I'm quite close to them in this respect. This was the Grande Halle when we overtook it, Annie Leibovitz's show. 8,000 images. She picked out what she wanted. Actually, this looks a little like a studio. You may know this, Linda, the editing studios, where you can pin what you want on the wall, you do your layouts, and it's like she would have moved her own studio to Arles. And this show will start to... Which one is this one?
From last
Oh,
summer.
yeah. So that's just a little from our archive. We had a Collier show, which is now going to Bad. We try to make them travel also. We help, but many people are also starting to help us because they are interested in what we produce, which is rather new for me. This was just an example of what we do in Switzerland, very short. This is the Biennial of Gstaad with all the artists we had this winter. For instance, Cecilia Bengolea dancing on with the glacier behind her. She just had also a project at the Dia Foundation. This was a Douglas Gordon thing. This is another piece of the biennial. I said I would go fast, but I had... So this is a piece which is maybe one of the best examples. Of course, I'm collecting, but this was produced together with two galleries, renowned galleries. And we tested it.
David Warner and Sadie Coles.
Yeah,
yes.
I mean,
Okay.
I didn't know whether I can do publicity here.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's all right.
Okay.
We're at an art fair.
So it was a very interesting. It was a very interesting process. This colored figure Look at this. This is really, I love this picture because in the back we had the residency of the dancer, and in the front we had this piece that we were testing before it was going to the Stedelijk Museum of Beatrix Roof, who actually is the one who really was probably at the start of the collaboration to have this piece happen.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. This is one of the more important purposes that private foundations can serve public institutions, by traveling shows that the institution may not have the funding for initially, and also through making loans from the collection without charging fees, which institutions now more and more do, and that is not affordable a lot of the time for the institutions who want the shows. So you're doing everything.
Well, I'm doing...
I mean, there's a balance between the research production component and the public access. Seasonal, but it's a balance.
Well, I don't know how the future will be, but of course, once you own your own place, there are running costs which will be higher than what I was able to do for the for the 10 first years in my foundation, which was really more targeted to enable other institutions to get something. And this you can have if you resist, the hunger to possess everything. But if you are happy and relaxed and not, not frustrated by seeing pieces and not being able to say they are mine, but they are ours. So this is really something which is philosophically going a little elsewhere. So don't let me lose my path on this discussion. But once you have your space, the running costs are horrendous, right? So I don't know what the future will be like. Maybe we will also have to look in our business plan. How can we pay some of our running costs of what we actually have produced? Because it's a way of going further, right? So yes. You say that in America it's a normal thing to do, to ask for fees when you lend a piece? We never did.
Some museums do that, not private foundations, which is one hole they can fill, especially collections that are quite dense in certain areas of contemporary art. So museums are very slow moving in acquiring things and in setting up shows. Foundations are quicker on their feet and can get it together a lot faster and pay some of the costs. So there is a purpose that supplements museums, which are important. I mean, I think it's true for all of us that our first exposure, our formative experience of art was in a public museum. And it's important to support them, and I know you do. You're on the board of the new museum.
Yeah, the new museum has no collection, though, so the new museum does not have to work on the conservation of the pieces.
This is another question, conservation. So when you establish a collection, you have to take care of it also, as this is all contemporary art. It's new, but it will age, it will mature, it will, especially traveling. As I think most collectors know, when you loan a piece, it rarely comes back in the condition it left. So institutions, this is where museums not only have scholarship, they have conservation labs. They can maintain and conserve the work. How are you going to deal with this in the future for yourself? Do you have conservators that you work with?
That's a great question because, of course, it's great to have your collections public, but when you start thinking about where you're thinking, how you're going to fund in time, it's expensive. We know how much the public institutions struggle. Even if they charge for loans or for the entrance, they struggle always to get the proper funding for them to keep on doing what they're doing. So those are very important questions. And when you talk about conservation, and you're talking about just painting is one thing, But when you're engaging with pieces like I do, with movement, with electronics, with other sorts of things, it's very challenging. Sometimes you have to wait for the artist to come back to Colombia to, in my case, to fix it, and sometimes he can authorize somebody. But I do not have a person that works all the time with that, but we do have sometimes to bring people to help us with the conservation, and that's another one of the challenges. So you have, for you to have your public, your collection public, you have the funding, then you have the conservation, also transportation. We have to mention about that. Sometimes you have big installations that just to transport them from Europe, that you have duties, you have taxes, you have insurances. It's not easy. But that's why each person has to think what is the best way to do it, and what is your possibilities as well, and your engagement that you can take. I think what you're doing, Maja, is amazing, and I think the impact that we'll have on the arts is going to be amazing. It's going to be.
I mean, we maybe that's because I didn't take enough time to explain. We are not open until we open the last of our building, which is the flagship, so to say, the building with Frank Gehry. But we actually produce every year. This is what I forgot to say. And we will open the center only once we know and that we have enough money to run everything. But having so many, and we do, but it's a quite complicated construct. But we do. I don't remember what I wanted to say. We open one after the. Yeah, we don't have to have everything open at the same time. I think that's really what it is.
I see.
By having so many buildings. Some buildings can be closed and less expensive to run, but they can help for a think tank, or they can be hosting some international shows, which is part of the whole system. You see, so you exchange shows, or you share collections. This thing can be really interesting. And so why Frank Gehry? It is mainly, of course, I'm really completely in love with him, and it's been some years. But it's also because it will attract more people in these low seasons, and this is really helpful for a city like Arles. I could speak for hours, but I see my...
yes, we want to open this up to questions from any of you. Anybody have a question? I have more, but yes, Neda. Wait, well, bring you a microphone.
This question is to Maja. How many curators do you have? And obviously you're at the top of the pyramid, deciding, for example, in Leibovitz and so on. Is that your decision or people who work with you?
Right now, the shows spin out of the collection, either for the monographies, right? Or we have a core group of 3 curators and 2 artists who work together with me. So we are 6 in this core group for the biggest part of the program. But this is not the Swiss Foundation. This is only for the space in Arles. So it depends on what we are talking here, right? So the Annie Leibovitz is an archive. We had acquired like 8,000 images. Out of the 8,000 images, we are going to produce several shows together with Annie. So it's very much Annie who chose. And it's been organized by the director of this Living Archive program, who works with us, whose name is Mathieu Humery. And he's been organizing the show together with our 1.5 producers and together with the studio of Annie. But other shows like the one which got cut here, like To the Moon via the beach, or the Systematically Open show, also the show of that we did with Tino Segal, and the models of Frank Gehry. This has been all thought by the core group, and it's part of group exhibitions, which are really an interesting system. which is a little long to explain too.
Yes, but it's not. I don't. Maybe you did it first. When we were talking. I mean, the Prada Foundation also has a core group of artists and writers and curators that.
It's one
become
permanent
a
think tank. Yeah. So they come out of it. I don't know who did it first.
But it's a growing trend. Another question?
The question is to both of you. Do you discover artists on your own personally, or do you depend upon art advisors to do that?
I love to discover them by myself.
You know, I think to have an art advisor is a great idea. I had one for a while, and it was a very good experience, especially when you have somebody. I used to work with Anna Sokolov, and the work with her was really interesting because even she was helping me, and she taught me a lot of things. She allowed me to take my own decisions as well. So it all depends, but I think each case is different for each individual. It depends on your goals. It depends on what you want to achieve with the things that you buy. But definitely, it has to be something in which you will be able to having a dialogue with the person that you're engaging with.
And I think the dialogue comes when you speak about what you like or what you see. Inevitably, of course, I speak with all the people whom I am related with in my work, and there are very good ideas coming also from outside, but without it being too formal.
I'm going to interject something. You mentioned earlier that now you're starting to buy work because of the space that it's going in. Do you also start to buy work because of the space that you have?
I'm resisting. I'm resisting.
But I think
But it's hard on an art fair, of course.
But definitely, when you know, the approach is completely different. When you have the space to locate pieces, or not only the space, but when you are thinking about your collection being public today or someday, your approach to a piece of art is completely different. And I think that's what is important. Mm-hmm. That's why I think it's important for each one to have like a goal. You want this as an investment, good for you. You want to have it at home, excellent. You want to have it public, then you must start thinking about some pieces of art that will be very meaningful, and that in the future will make that somebody take the time to take a train or take a plane to go and visit those institutions. So it all depends on the goal or the vision that you have for your collection.
Great point. I see a hand back there.
And if you have the goal to show it in the public, do you also have a goal to increase the amount of people who are interested in art, with educating children or such things?
Do you mean to establish an actual education program, or just to broaden the public? Just to clarify the question.
Well, I guess if I take it right,
not enough people go to museums actually, or to contemporary art museums. They struggle also with membership numbers, some of them. And for example, the Kunsthalle Rapperswil, Zeughaus Rapperswil has almost no visitors, and it costs the community a lot, which they want. But many places have a little bit of problems, and I think it's because people are not used to see contemporary art when they are young or a little bit older also. They don't want to take the time to start to understand it or follow it, yes.
I think that's a good point, and it is true. I always, in America, when I travel across America in small towns, I'm always amazed to find small museums that may have started as private collections of a very specific sort, not always art, that are completely supported by communities that have no money, but they keep it going. And these are not tourist towns, you know, it's just kind of, you happen in there and there's a museum. It's kind of amazing. And I think there are small museums all over Europe also, but they're usually state-supported, so it's quite different.
I think you can do programs in the museum for children, but if you engage with the schools which are around in Rapperswil, I'm sure you would also have visitors if the classes could come. I don't know how much that is easy or made more difficult. It really depends on the conditions that you can offer for things to happen.
Well, I think the mere fact that the place exists, that your foundation in Arles exists, that it's there, that it's in a particular region where people move around, the possibility of exposure is increased.
It's just that it is a public-private initiative,
Right.
so yeah. And we host a festival, which is a very popular and very, very well visited. I think they have 100,000 since 4 years, 100,000 plus visitors for 3 months, which is much lesser than what you can get in Bogotá, but which is much more than what you would get in Rapperswil, I presume. But as I said, it's a public-private thing. I don't get the public funding, but the festival gets the public funding, which is somehow a win-win situation for us, because the visitors of the festival may come and see our shows too, or they may come to our conferences, or they just may come and be exposed to what art is. It's contemporary art and not only photography.
Does anyone have a burning question? Because we're reaching our time limit.
Excuse me, Linda. I just wanted to
Yes,
complement that. I think at the end, the challenge is to attract visitors to the museums. Children, of course, would be extremely important, but at the end of the story, I think it's like a company. It's marketing. How you are able to have experiences as good as so that the people will come and visit you, and that is talking about the mixture between fashion and art. Fashion people are struggling. Fashion brands are struggling to bring people to their stores, and they are realizing how come museums, especially in the United States, are bringing millions of visitors a year, and they are looking at art institutions for the answers on how to have better experiences and how to bring more people. That's why they started making so many collaborations with artists recently, because it's all about the experience. So if you have a good marketing mentality, not just open the institution or the museum and wait to see who comes. No, you have to be very active, I believe, in merchandising and to see how to bring attention with good and outstanding pieces that will create memories for people.
Let's have one more, someone who's really anxious to ask a question. That's right. We'll make it short. I know.
Maja Hoffman, you told us that you love to discover artists by yourself. Does it mean, I'm here, does it mean that you will discover artists outside of the established circles, outside maybe of the circle of galleries and institutions and that one of your purpose is to show in Arles and somewhere else artists that we don't have the opportunity to see in Paris, in London, in the galleries or in the institution. So to be different as for the program as an institution with different artists.
That would, of course, be wonderful, and in the best of cases will happen. But what's really a priority for me is the quality. So this is what will be always the first criteria.
Thank you all. Thank you, Maja and Leon. It's been great.